Many people feel that global problems are too big to solve. They wonder how ordinary individuals can make a real difference. It is easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of injustice or the power of entrenched regimes. Yet history teaches us a surprising lesson. Profound social and political change does not always require a majority of the population to rise up. My research, conducted over many years, has revealed a fascinating pattern. A relatively small but deeply committed group of people can indeed change the world. This is the core of what has become known as the 3.5% rule. The 3.5% rule emerged from a careful study of hundreds of campaigns over the last century. Between 1900 and 2006, my colleague Maria Stefan and I looked at political movements. We compared violent insurgencies with non-violent civil resistance campaigns. We wanted to know which were more successful in achieving their stated goals. The data showed a clear trend. Non-violent movements were far more likely to succeed. More strikingly, we found that no campaign failed once it had achieved the active and sustained participation of just 3.5% of the population. This small percentage, when mobilized, has been a tipping point for transformative change. It is crucial to understand what this 3.5% represents. It is not about passive sympathy or quiet agreement with a cause. It refers to people who are actively involved in nonviolent action. This means they are participating in marches, strikes, boycotts, civil disobedience, or other forms of direct action. Their participation is also sustained over time, not just a one-off protest. This level of commitment signals a broad base of support and a willingness to endure hardship for the cause. It creates a powerful force that governments find increasingly difficult to ignore or repress without severe consequences to their own legitimacy and power. This essay will explore the power of this 3.5% rule. We will look at why nonviolent resistance is so effective. We will examine historical examples of its success. We will also discuss how these principles can be applied today, especially in our current complex world. The path of nonviolent action is not easy. It requires courage, strategy, and unwavering commitment. But it offers a genuine pathway to create a more just and democratic world. Understanding this potential is the first step towards harnessing its power for positive change in our own times. A fundamental question my research sought to answer was why nonviolent movements succeed more often than violent ones. The data is compelling. Our studies indicate that nonviolent campaigns have been twice as likely to achieve their objectives compared to violent insurgencies. This holds true even when facing heavily armed and repressive regimes. This finding often surprises people. Many assume that violence is the ultimate form of power. However, the strategic advantages of nonviolent resistance are numerous. They often outweigh the perceived strengths of armed struggle, leading to more durable and democratic outcomes for societies. One key reason for the higher success rate of nonviolent movements is their ability to attract broader participation. Violent campaigns, by their very nature, tend to restrict who can participate. They often require physical fitness, a willingness to use lethal force, and secrecy. This limits the pool of potential activists. Nonviolent movements, in contrast, are open to a much wider range of people. The elderly, young people, women, people with disabilities, and those with moral objections to violence can all find ways to contribute meaningfully. This inclusivity builds larger and more diverse movements, which are harder for opponents to discredit or dismantle easily. Furthermore, nonviolent action holds a distinct moral advantage. When movements refrain from violence, it becomes much more difficult for regimes to justify using brutal force against them. State repression against peaceful protesters often backfires. It can lead to increased international condemnation and, crucially, can trigger shifts in loyalty within the regime's own pillars of support, such as the police or military. These security force defections are often critical turning points. Nonviolent discipline can also sway public opinion, both domestically and globally, garnering sympathy and support for the movement's cause and isolating the oppressive regime. Finally, the outcomes of successful nonviolent movements tend to be more positive in the long term. Violent revolutions, even when successful, can pave the way for new forms of authoritarian rule or prolonged civil conflict. The methods used in the struggle often shape the nature of the post-conflict society. Nonviolent movements, because they rely on mass civic participation and coalition building, are significantly more likely to lead to democratic institutions and lasting peace. They foster a culture of negotiation, compromise, and respect for human rights, which are essential foundations for a stable and just society. History is rich with examples of non-violent movements achieving remarkable transformations. The Indian independence movement, led by Mahatma Gandhi, stands as a monumental testament to this power. Millions of Indians participated in acts of civil disobedience, boycotts of British goods, and non-cooperation with colonial authorities. They faced imprisonment, beatings, and even death, yet they largely adhered to non-violent principles. This sustained pressure, involving a significant portion of the population, ultimately made British rule untenable. India's freedom was won not through an armed uprising, but through the persistent, peaceful resistance of its people, demonstrating the power of collective will. In the United States, the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s provides another powerful example. African Americans and their allies challenged deeply entrenched segregation and discrimination. They used tactics like bus boycotts, lunch counter sit-ins, freedom rides, and mass marches. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr. championed the philosophy of nonviolence. The bravery of activists facing police dogs and fire hoses broadcast to the nation and the world pricked the conscience of many. This movement led to landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, fundamentally altering American society. Beyond these well-known cases, many other nations have experienced profound change through nonviolent means. In South Africa, decades of internal resistance, coupled with international boycotts and sanctions, were crucial in dismantling the brutal apartheid system. In Poland, the Solidarity movement, a trade union, grew into a massive social movement that challenged communist rule through strikes and protests, paving the way for democratic transition. The People Power Revolution in the Philippines in 1986 saw millions peacefully take to the streets, leading to the ousting of a dictator. Each of these cases underscores the potential of organized, non-violent action. While the 3.5% figure was derived from systematic analysis of a broad data set, these historical examples embody its spirit. They show that when a critical mass of people actively withdraws their consent and cooperation from an unjust system, that system cannot survive. The courage and strategic acumen of these movements offer enduring lessons. They remind us that even the most formidable structures of power can be challenged and changed by ordinary people united in a common, non-violent purpose. Their triumphs echo through time, inspiring new generations to take up the mantle of peaceful struggle. The goal of nonviolent resistance, as I see it, is not merely revolution in the traditional sense, a complete overthrow often leading to a new set of rulers. Instead, it is about transcendence. This means elevating society to a higher realm of truth, justice, and understanding. It is a profound shift in consciousness, where old ways of thinking and governing are no longer seen as acceptable or inevitable. This process aims to transform relationships between citizens and the state, and among citizens themselves, fostering a more ethical and principled public life. It is a deeper, more fundamental change than simply swapping one power structure for another. This concept of transcendence draws inspiration from core human values. Documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the American Declaration of Independence articulate ideals such as dignity, equality, and liberty. When a government consistently violates these fundamental principles, nonviolent movements work to realign governance with these higher truths. They do this by exposing injustice, appealing to conscience, and demonstrating a better way. The struggle itself becomes a process of societal learning and moral development. People begin to envision and demand a system that truly reflects their deepest values and aspirations for a just society. Achieving this kind of transcendence leads to more durable and legitimate change. When laws and governance shift because a significant portion of the population has internalized new norms of justice and fairness, these changes are more likely to stick. They are not imposed by force but emerge from a collective evolution in understanding. This makes the new order more resilient and less prone to backlash or a return to old patterns of oppression. The aim is to win not just a political victory, but a victory in the hearts and minds of the people, including, eventually, even former opponents. This approach emphasizes transforming existing institutions where possible, rather than seeking their complete destruction. While some structures may be irredeemably unjust, others can be reformed and repurposed to serve the common good. Transcendence seeks to build upon what is good, correct what is flawed, and introduce new principles that elevate the entire system. This constructive approach minimizes the chaos and potential for violence that can accompany purely destructive revolutionary fervor. It is about building a better future, grounded in shared values and a commitment to human dignity for all members of society. Section 5. Navigating the modern landscape strategies for today's movements. The world today presents both new opportunities and significant challenges for nonviolent movements. We live in an age of instant global communication. The internet and social media can be powerful tools for mobilization, allowing activists to organize and share information rapidly across vast distances. However, these same technologies also enable sophisticated state surveillance and the spread of disinformation. Modern movements must therefore be highly adaptable and strategically astute to navigate this complex digital landscape effectively. They need to harness the benefits of technology while mitigating its risks, ensuring their message of truth and justice cuts through the noise. A crucial strategy for success is the use of diverse tactics. My research and that of others indicates that movements relying on a narrow range of actions, such as only mass demonstrations, are often less resilient. While large protests are visible and can galvanize support, they should be part of a broader repertoire. Effective campaigns often employ economic non-cooperation, such as strikes, boycotts, and boycotts, supporting ethical businesses. They might also use civil disobedience, stay-at-home actions, or creative cultural resistance. The key is to choose tactics that maximize pressure on the opponent while maintaining non-violent discipline and broad participation. Deep preparation and capacity building are equally vital. Successful movements of the past were often built on years of grassroots organizing, training, and leadership development. This foundational work is essential before a movement reaches its peak moments of confrontation. Activists need training in nonviolent strategy, communication, de-escalation, and security culture. Organizations need to build trust, develop clear decision-making processes, and plan meticulously for various contingencies, including how to respond to state repression. This internal strength allows movements to sustain themselves through difficult periods and adapt to changing circumstances. Finally, building broad and inclusive coalitions is fundamental. To reach the 3.5% threshold of active participation and to exert maximum leverage, movements must unite diverse segments of society. This means forging alliances across different social classes, ethnic groups, religions, and political ideologies around a shared vision for change. Both grassroots, bottom-up, and grass-tops engaging influential leaders' coordination are important. An inclusive movement that reflects the true diversity of a population is harder to dismiss as a fringe group and can tap into a wider array of resources and networks, significantly boosting its power and resilience. Section 6. New hurdles, new strategies, addressing the decline in nonviolent success. Despite the historical effectiveness of nonviolent resistance and the widespread adoption of its tactics, we have observed a concerning trend in the past decade. As I noted in a keynote at Bates College in January 2025, the success rates of nonviolent movements have unfortunately declined. They have fallen back to levels not seen since before the era of Gandhi's major campaigns. This is a serious development that requires careful analysis and strategic adaptation from activists and scholars alike. Ignoring this trend would be a disservice to those who risk so much for freedom and justice around the world. One major factor contributing to this decline is authoritarian adaptation. Autocratic regimes have become more adept at countering nonviolent movements. They have learned from past successes of civil resistance and developed sophisticated strategies to suppress dissent. These include advanced methods of narrative control and propaganda to discredit activists and shape public opinion. They also employ tactics like delegating violence to unidentifiable actors, making it harder to hold the state accountable. Furthermore, selective repression, targeting key leaders or organizers, aims to decapitate movements before they can gain mass traction, alongside counter-mobilization efforts to create an illusion of popular support for the regime. Another significant hurdle is the decline in defections from key pillars of societal support, particularly security forces. Historically, successful movements often triggered shifts in loyalty among police, military, or economic elites, who then refused to obey orders to repress protesters or withdrew their support from the regime. Modern autocrats are investing heavily in coup-proofing strategies. They foster loyalty within the security apparatus through patronage, indoctrination, and by creating parallel security forces. This makes it more challenging for movements to erode the regime's coercive power from within, a critical component of past victories. Moreover, some contemporary movements may be over-relying on highly visible mass demonstrations, sometimes at the expense of other crucial tactics. While street protests are important, sustained campaigns often require a broader array of actions, including less visible but highly disruptive forms of non-cooperation like general strikes or stay-at-home protests. Coupled with this, there is often a lack of deep organizational foundations and rigorous training in non-violent discipline and strategy that characterized earlier successful movements. Current movements also sometimes struggle to mobilize the same high proportions of the population, the 3 to 5% that was common in many peak historical campaigns, making it harder to reach that critical mass. Section 7. Rekindling the Flame. Solutions for overcoming modern challenges. To counteract the recent decline in the effectiveness of nonviolent movements, activists must embrace enhanced strategic planning. Movements need to become learning organizations, constantly analyzing the evolving tactics of their opponents, and adapting their own strategies accordingly. This involves meticulous planning that anticipates escalating repression and develops proactive responses. For instance, movements can prepare for communication blackouts, arrests of leaders, and disinformation campaigns. Developing resilient, decentralized structures and fostering a culture of strategic innovation are key to outmaneuvering adaptive authoritarian regimes and maintaining momentum even under duress. A critical area of focus must be the deliberate erosion of the regime's pillars of support. While defections may be harder to achieve today, they remain crucial. Movements should identify pillars of society, such as the business community, civil servants, religious institutions, or specific units within security forces, that may already harbor doubts about the regime's legitimacy or policies. Targeted outreach, appeals to conscience, and highlighting the costs of continued support for an unjust regime can gradually weaken these pillars. Creating safe channels for potential defectors to communicate and shift allegiances is also an important, albeit sensitive, undertaking for any movement. It is also essential to re-emphasize the importance of employing diverse tactics with disciplined execution. Movements should not rely solely on street protests, but should integrate a wide spectrum of non-violent actions. This includes economic non-cooperation like targeted boycotts and strikes, political non-cooperation such as refusing to participate in fraudulent elections, and social non-cooperation like creating alternative community structures. Crucially, all actions must be carried out with strict non-violent discipline. This requires ongoing training for participants to ensure that responses to provocation do not escalate into violence, which can undermine the movement's legitimacy and popular support. Finally, fostering unity and unparalleled inclusivity is paramount to building the numbers needed to reach the 3.5% threshold and beyond. Pro-democracy movements must strive to create broad alliances that transcend traditional societal cleavages. This means actively working to include marginalized groups, bridging ideological divides where possible, and ensuring that the movement's goals and strategies reflect the aspirations of a wide cross-section of the population. A united front, demonstrating widespread dissatisfaction with the status quo, and a shared vision for a better future, is far more powerful and harder for any regime to ignore or suppress effectively. Section 8. The American Experiment: Civil Resistance in the United States Today. The United States has a rich history of civil resistance, from the abolitionist movement to women's suffrage, labor rights, and the civil rights movement. This legacy, combined with a relatively strong civil society and constitutional protections for speech and assembly, provides fertile ground for nonviolent action. However, the current era presents unique challenges. The global wave of autocratization we are witnessing often manifests differently than the clear-cut military coups of the past. Today we often see elected leaders gradually dismantling democratic institutions from within, making the nature of the threat more insidious and sometimes harder to mobilize against effectively. Despite these challenges, resistance in the U.S. remains robust and remarkably diverse. Data from the Crowd Counting Consortium, which I co-direct, shows a significant level of protest activity. For example, in February 2025, there were over 2,085 reported protests across the country, a substantial number compared to 937 in February 2017. These actions have supported a wide array of causes including advocacy for federal workers, LGBTQ+ rights, immigrant rights, environmental protection, and opposition to various corporate and political policies. This demonstrates a vibrant civic engagement and a willingness to use public voice to demand change. Interestingly, we are observing a strategic evolution in some quarters of American activism. While large-scale street protests continue, there appears to be a growing recognition of the power of economic non-cooperation. We have seen examples such as consumer boycotts and divestment calls targeting corporations over their policies or the actions of their leaders, like those aimed at Tesla due to concerns about Elon Musk's influence. Actions like the Day Without Immigrants highlight the significant economic contributions of immigrant communities and the disruptive power of their withdrawal. Furthermore, litigation and legal challenges are increasingly being used as a form of people power, crucial for documenting facts, holding power accountable, and protecting the space for dissent. The principles of the 3.5% rule are highly relevant in the American context. Achieving meaningful, lasting change on contentious issues requires mobilizing a dedicated, active segment of the population. It involves individuals connecting their actions with their deepest values, choosing voice over exit or passive loyalty, as Albert Hirschman described. The role of media in shaping public understanding and narratives remains critical, just as it was during the civil rights movement. While the challenges are real, the ingredients for effective civil resistance are present, offering pathways for citizens to work towards a more perfect union, grounded in truth and justice. Section 9. A Call to Conscience. Your role in shaping a just world. The central message from my research is one of hope and empowerment. Significant change is achievable, and it does not require a majority to initiate it. The 3.5% rule demonstrates that a committed, strategically astute, and active minority can be the catalyst for transforming societies. This understanding shifts our perspective from feeling powerless in the face of daunting challenges to recognizing the profound potential that lies within collective, nonviolent action. It is a call to discard cynicism and embrace the possibility that our efforts, when joined with others, can indeed bend the arc of history towards justice. This power ultimately resides in individual choices. Each person has agency. We can choose to align our actions with our values, to speak out against injustice, and to contribute to building a better world. This doesn't mean everyone must become a frontline activist, facing arrest or physical danger. Participation can take many forms: supporting movements financially, spreading awareness, educating oneself and others, engaging in community organizing, boycotting unjust systems, or simply refusing to be complicit in wrongdoing. Every act of conscience, no matter how small it may seem, contributes to the broader current of change. The path of nonviolent resistance is undoubtedly challenging. It demands immense courage, discipline, strategic thinking, and perseverance in the face of adversity, and often, brutal repression. However, it is a path that is historically proven to be more effective and more likely to lead to sustainable democratic outcomes than violence. It is a struggle that seeks not to destroy but to transcend, to elevate our societies to a higher plane of truth, compassion, and justice. It calls upon the best within us to envision and work for a world governed by these principles. Therefore, I extend a heartfelt call to action to every person reading this. Learn more about the power of nonviolent civil resistance. Explore its history, its strategies, and its potential in your own community and nation. Find ways, consistent with your own values and capacities, to become involved. Whether you are challenging local injustices or contributing to global movements for human rights and democracy, your participation matters. Be part of that vital 3.5%, that critical mass of engaged citizens working together to create a world where truth, justice, and human dignity prevail for all.